The Combine is well underway in Indianapolis. Mike Macdonald having an opportunity to chat with reporters on Wednesday. What did he dish out intel-wise on the state of the team and what they're looking to accomplish at the Combine? Going to be breaking it all down here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, whether you're tuning in from nearby Sumner, Washington, or if you're across country in Tallahassee, Florida. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The NFL Combine well underway. Workouts are going to start this afternoon in Indianapolis. The Underwear Olympics, some people like to call it. Get a chance to see how these different prospects stack up against one another as they are battling for draft position. And, of course, money coming into the National Football League. I'm going to be taking a deep dive into some of the comments from Mike Macdonald in his first Combine press conference. If you may remember, he missed last year. And I'm going to be taking a look at running backs, tight ends, linebackers, safeties, and corners. It is a jam-packed episode looking at some personnel fits that the Seahawks may have that'll be on display in Indianapolis. Let's get to it now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This time last year, Mike Macdonald was back in the Pacific Northwest while the Combine was going on, trying to finalize his first coaching staff, was not in attendance in Indianapolis. John Schneider and company held that down while Mike Macdonald was working on trying to play catch up as the last head coach that was hired in the coaching cycle. Much has changed this time of year. This time around, Mike Macdonald is in Indianapolis. The Seahawks have their coaching staff hired. He indicated that they are not going to most likely be adding anyone else. They like the staff as they have it set up, and a lot of experience being added to that staff, which is certainly already paying dividends this week in Indianapolis during the Combine and player evaluations, where position coaches are a critical part of that process.
Last year, you were working on trying to get everything going with the staff back in Seattle, and then this time around, you got all these new staff members that bring a lot of experience to the table and have been involved in this process. How much is that helping with easing this transition here, this first time as a head coach, that you're involved with this? You have these guys that have been in this process before.
Well, you're always going to lean on your staff's experience. So wherever that's coming from, that's one of the reasons why you hired those people, why you brought them onto your team. So you're going to lean on those guys, from things that they've learned and their knowledge. So we have a unique perspective now for our new offensive staff. It's great to have a staff in place this time around, where last year I think we were finalizing it about this time. So look, I just really believe in the men that we brought into our coaching staff, their leadership ability, coaching ability. It's going to be a fun group to work with. I think our players are going to love playing for them.
As Macdonald pointed out there, with the additions of Clint Kubiak, John Benton, Rick Dennison, Justin Alton, all of the staff, these guys have all been involved in the NFL Combine numerous times, being of experienced assistant coaches that have been around the game, and they've been around a lot of different position groups. And so that is invaluable. And they've had the time now going into the Combine where Mike Macdonald, John Schneider, the scouting department, they were able to pick the brains of these position coaches in terms of what are you looking for personnel-wise. And because these guys have been through the rigors of the Combine, and it wasn't first-year coaches like Ryan Grubb or Scott Huff, who, they were successful college coaches, but they hadn't exactly been through this process of the Combine and how it goes with the roster construction aspect in the NFL. The Seahawks have totally taken a 180 in that regard. And so that was the big thing for Mike Macdonald yesterday, that he was emphasizing this is clearly a situation where the Seahawks are ahead of the curve compared to a year ago. And even though they're installing a new offense, you have all this continuity with so many new coaches that have coached together previously. Some of your holdovers like Kennedy Palomalu have coached with Clint Kubiak before and with Rick Dennison before. You have all that continuity. It should help you hit the ground running, getting this offense installed, especially with the expertise that these coaches have. And now you add in the Combine, being able to have that expertise on site with these position coaches that can really hammer home, this is what we're looking for personnel-wise to maximize this scheme. So that was certainly a big takeaway. One of the things that jumped out to me, there's been so much talk about the center position. And last year, Oluwatimi took over as a starter midway through the year when Connor Williams abruptly retired during the bye week. And Oluwatimi had his moments. He played solid football at times in the second half. But this is a new scheme that is going to emphasize linemen being able to get out and run. Athleticism is going to be prioritized. And Mike Macdonald had an interesting comment on a guy who I think is absolutely a dark horse now to watch potentially start for the Seahawks in 2025. In Jaylen Sundell saying, I thought Jaylen played really good football for us from being an undrafted free agent last year to competing for a starting position. So he's right there. We're excited about his development, but Jaylen's shown his ability to play all 5 spots, which is a flexibility that is crucial for us, and we're excited about him. Sundell had to play some extensive snaps against the Green Bay Packers when Oluwatimi got hurt in the first quarter in that loss at Lumen Field and played pretty darn well. He had a key block that dished out a big opening for Zach Charbonnet on a 26-yard touchdown run in the second half, and you can see the athleticism. He was a standout tackle at North Dakota State at the FCS level, but he's played guard. He's played center. That's what they've got him right now. But this is a guy that earned a roster spot in large part because they could plug him in at any of those positions. He's got that kind of athleticism, very high football IQ. John Schneider name dropped him first when talking about centers, and that may have just been a coincidence. But it does seem like the Seahawks are trying to, under the table, sell Jaylen Sundell as a possibility there. This is a guy that had a really good college career. Gray Zabel's getting a lot of talk as a North Dakota State prospect this year. Jaylen Sundell was Gray Zabel before Gray Zabel, and this guy's got even more versatility. So Jaylen Sundell is a name to keep a close eye on. And for those of you that are wondering whether Mike Macdonald has been putting out a smoke screen on Geno Smith, I don't know that I've ever seen a coach that was more visibly frustrated by continuing to get questions about the status of a player than what we saw from Mike Macdonald this week. He was joking with us about it, but you can tell that he's getting tired about being asked about Geno Smith's situation, and he literally told us this off podium. I'd love to announce it right now that we're rolling and Geno's extended and we can stop getting the question. And again, he emphasized that part of it, but he also said you got to respect the process, and our guys are awesome. The way John Schneider handles the relationship with agents, it's a lot of stuff going on. Both he and John Schneider made it very clear this is what they would like to get done. They want to get Geno Smith extended. This isn't just a salary cap move. This team is higher on him than what some fans are, and the locker room certainly loves him. Seems like they're trying to get this deal done with their veteran quarterback. And the last extension in 2023 happened on March 6th, coming right out of the combine. They're going to be talking to Smith's agent this week, and Macdonald has reiterated over and over again that Geno Smith is his guy. At this point, I just can't see any way that this is a smokescreen, and Mike Macdonald is pretty straight to the hip on a lot of things. I expect that they're going to get this deal done sooner rather than later. That is going to be one of their top priorities heading towards the start of free agency, middle of next month. And speaking of free agency, one last thing that jumped out to me, talking about the defensive line as a whole, Mike Macdonald made it very clear. You look at what the Philadelphia Eagles did this past season, winning the Super Bowl, and the depth, the talent they had in the defensive line. They didn't rest on their laurels. They continued to add guys to that defensive line. Expect to see Mike Macdonald and the Seahawks doing that. They want Jaron Reed back. And in fact, it sounded like the Seahawks were motivated to get this done. Macdonald saying that he's confident on how Jay Reed feels about us, and he knows how we feel about him. It sounds like that is a deal that Mike Macdonald is really hoping is going to get done. We'll see what happens. But even if Jaron Reed is back, this is a really good draft class of defensive tackle. I've talked about a number of prospects that are going to be on display today, testing at the combine in earlier episodes. The Seahawks are not going to just sit back and relax. This is an opportunity for them to be able to go out and continue adding because there is no such thing as too much depth on the defensive line. They're hoping that Jaron Reed is going to be part of that in 2025. Coming up next, we're going to zoom back to the combine. Some personnel fits on offense. We've looked at QBs, receivers, offensive linemen. It's time to talk some running backs and tight ends. I'll get to that coming up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith, A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, and thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Workouts kicking off today at the NFL Combine. Had a chance to interview some of these guys that are going to be working out today. Had to cut my trip a little bit shorter to the Combine than usual, but had an opportunity to speak with a number of defensive linemen, edge rushers during that first day of player interviews yesterday. That's obviously going to be the focal point of this draft class. But when you look at the Seahawks on offense, there is a new scheme with Klint Kubiak coming on board, and that means we could see some significant personnel changes, even at position groups where maybe Seattle seems to be well set. And one of those spots is running back. John Schneider does not normally give away intel on position groups that he thinks are deep. That's not normally something that he does. He is very guarded when it comes to giving up that kind of information. But he couldn't help himself the other day talking about running backs. And this is the deepest, I have to agree with it, it's the deepest running back class that I've ever seen in the time that I've been evaluating college football players coming into the NFL. I don't expect Seattle is going to be investing an early draft pick in a running back with Ken Walker, Zach Charbonnet, and Kenny McIntosh still on the roster. But that's another spot where injuries, we saw it back in 2019, injuries can come into play and knock out a bunch of running backs quickly. You can never have too much depth there. And this is a class I can see the Seahawks wanting to take advantage of. As far as running backs that I am going to be watching closely in these combine workouts, I want to start off with Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State. And he's kind of been under the radar, surprisingly, because Ohio State has two really good running backs. And there's been talk about Travion Henderson being the one that's going to go in the first round. Quinshon Judkins is a really good football player, though. He can catch the ball, runs with power, has underrated burst, can make guys miss. This guy was a dynamic runner at Ole Miss before transferring to Ohio State this past year. And he had to take a little bit of a reduction in workload, but still put up really good numbers as a key part of that Buckeyes national championship team. He's got the size that you're looking for, has some special teams capabilities at the next level. Judkins is a guy that I think is going to go on day 2. Henderson, as I said, is probably going to go earlier than that. He'll be the first of the 2 Ohio State backs picked. But Judkins, this guy has starter upside. And Seattle, look, Ken Walker III is going to last year of his contract. They've had some injury issues with a few of their other backs. I could see if this guy falls deep into the second day or even somehow into early day 3, that John Schneider is not going to be able to resist, because you're always looking to add depth to this position. Judkins is a guy that I think is a really good fit in either zone or gap schemes. He's a guy that can run in a little bit of everything. As far as a player who I think is going to be best suited for an offense like Klint Kubiak's, DJ Giddens from Kansas State. And if you look at his build, he's 6'1", 212 pounds. Like, this is a tall, big running back, but he's not necessarily the style you would expect at that size. He isn't a bulldozer. He's not a guy that's going to truck through defenders often. He is more of a glider at that size, but he has as good a ball carrier vision as you are going to have in this draft class, this loaded draft class. He's very patient. He knows how to set up those cutbacks, and that's crucial when you're talking about zone schemes. He's got more wiggle with his build than you would expect. That makes him a really good zone scheme fit. I could see him excelling in the wide zone the way that so many backs in Mike Shanahan's system do. Didn't necessarily have the most explosiveness, but think about it. When they had a fullback in Mike Anderson rush for 1,000 yards in that system, it's because of the ability to be patient, read your cutbacks, and be able to hit those holes and then break tackles, make guys miss after that. I can see DJ Giddens checking off all those boxes. Another guy that has some ability to catch the ball, do some pass protection things on third down. I expect early day 3 for DJ Giddens. This is a guy that could make a lot of sense for the Seahawks. And my last running back I'm going to be watching, Donovan Edwards, only a couple years ago, was a catalyst for that national championship run that Michigan had. Didn't have a great final season with the Wolverines, but this guy is a big body back that has plenty of burst, not the quickest back, but he has a really good top speed. I'm interested to see how he tests. This is a guy who has been getting 6th, 7th round grades. And part of that is because of the draft class. There's just so much talent at the running back spot. There's other years he'd be an early day 3 pick. But he didn't have a great final season for the Wolverines. 2 years ago was a big part of that national championship run. But I look at this kid's talent and the fact that he has had a lot of success in a gap-oriented scheme. Some are going to wonder if he's a good fit, but I think that the ball carrier vision's there. There's enough athleticism there. There's enough ability to make guys miss in space that taking a flyer on him late in day 3, that may be the best spot for the Seahawks to add to their running back room. And obviously, Mike Macdonald is going to have intel on this kid because his buddy Jim Harbaugh coached him at Michigan. So I think Donovan Edwards is certainly somebody to watch. I want to see how he tests because that's going to be a big component here for a guy where there are some questions in terms of his quickness and his suddenness. Top speed is there, but I'm interested to see what the testing looks like. As for the tight end position for the Seahawks, that is one that could be in a little bit more flux. Now, Mike Macdonald, one other thing that he said off podium about Noah Fant, he pushed back a little bit at the idea that Noah Fant had not improved at blocking, and it sounded to me like he was still sold on Noah Fant being a really good fit at Clint Kubiak's offense. So Noah Fant may very well be on this roster this next season under his current contract with that big cap hit. The Seahawks may decide to stick with that. But they still have questions replacing Farrell Brown, and A.J. Barner is going to go into year 2. They're excited about him, but this is still a position that you can add. And Kubiak has talked multiple times since being hired about the value of blocking at the tight end position. That being said, he's also had a lot of success with guys who can run after the catch at that spot, can create as pass catchers. And there's some interesting players in that regard. Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green. This guy is built like a running back. Or plays like a running back, but he's built like a tight end. And you don't see very many players in this position that are like that. I cannot wait to see how this guy tests because I have a feeling that he is going to have off-the-charts numbers. There's questions about the blocking, still unrefined in that area. But as far as a movable piece, you could put him in the backfield if you want. I could see Clint Kubiak being really intrigued by this guy. And this is a deep tight end class. He might not go until late day 2 or early day 3, but with those tools, positional flexibility, the pass-catching talent, I think that this is a kid to keep a very close eye on that could do a lot of damage in the NFL, and I think that this is a combine where we could see him make himself a lot of money. The other 2 tight ends that I'm going to be watching closely, I've talked quite a bit about Mason Taylor to this point. When you turn on LSU tape, the numbers don't necessarily match with the physical tools. You see these flashes. I have seen first-round ability for Mason Taylor. The problem has been that it has been very hit and miss. There have been a lot of games where he's kind of went AWOL, he's disappeared. There's been times where focus drops have been an issue. But if you turn on the tape, you can see the speed. I think he's going to run really well. This is a guy that's got good size. There's some decent blocking tape there. Again, very inconsistent. You are going to be banking on your coaching staff getting more consistency out of this guy because I think he's got the traits that you're looking for to be that all-around tight end that I believe Clint Kubiak is going to be looking for. There's still been some people saying, hey, he's going to go earlier than what many are projecting. But right now I'm pegging him as a square day 2 fit at the tight end spot. Testing could push him higher than that, though. This kid has all the physical tools. It's just been trying to get the production consistently on the field out of him. And the last tight end, Jackson Hawes out of Georgia Tech, a much different player than the first 2 I mentioned. Don't see the pass-catching upside, but if Clint Kubiak wants to bring in somebody that is going to be a physical presence in the run-blocking department, Jackson Hawes, you can listen to his comments today to Combine about how much he loves being able to get after people as a blocker and the tenacity he plays with. You can see it on tape. His play backs up his words. If you're looking for an inline tight end that can absolutely have a positive impact on your run game right out of the gate, I think that Hawes is that guy. And I think he's got that chippiness, that attitude that Clint Kubiak is looking for. And in this draft class, he's going to be squarely a day 3 selection. But I'm curious to see what he tests like, too, because this is not a guy that had a ton of pass-catching production. But when he did catch passes, there were some signs of promise there. So I'm curious to see what he runs forte. I want to see what he looks like in the combine at the tight end spot. When we come back, I'm going to shift over to defense from some personnel fits for the Seahawks, a handful of linebackers, some strong safeties, corners, and free safeties. Going to be blitzing through a number of players to keep an eye on in Indianapolis who could be good fits for the Seahawks scheme-wise. That'll be coming up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or I'm looking for Luka Doncic to hit a clutch three for his new team in LA. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com. For your shot at $150 in bonus bets, make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, and thank you, as always, during this Combine week for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen. 5 days a week. The Indianapolis NFL Combine well underway. We've got athletic testing going on as we speak at Lucas Oil Stadium, breaking down some personnel fits. We are to our last few position groups on defense and going to be looking at some players that could be good fits for Mike Macdonald's defense. And I want to start with linebackers here. This is a position that I don't know that we're going to see Seattle be overly aggressive looking to add players because they are prioritizing getting a deal done with Ernest Jones. But there are a couple names that jump out to me day 2 through day 3 that could make sense, especially if Ernest Jones doesn't return. Cody Lindenberg from Minnesota. He's one of those players that is kind of sneaky athletic, but he really stands out because of his instincts. That makes him play faster. He had a great Senior Bowl, had a really good final season. You can see the athleticism coming back in coverage. He's got some blitzing ability. Jamon Dumas-Johnson from Kentucky, another player that's on the smaller end of the spectrum, but he's got the sideline-to-sideline speed you're looking for. He is a sound tackler. And Barrett Carter from Clemson is another player. He actually measured in a little bigger than I thought he was going to today at 231 pounds. That I really liked on tape. I'm just wondering if physically he's going to be able to hold up, but you can see the athleticism. He's that modern prototype for off-ball linebacker. Obviously, he's played for one of the Blue Bloods in college football at Clemson. All three of those players, they're in that 230 to 240 pound range. You're not going to get any of those big traditional body linebackers. Those guys are very rarely coming into the NFL now. But all three of these guys have the ability to run and hunt for the football. They're sound tacklers. They have been the leaders in the huddle, so to speak. They call the plays on the field. All these guys fit the bill as players that I think Mike Macdonald would be really excited about. And I want to lump the strong safeties in with the linebackers because in today's NFL, especially Mike Macdonald, he likes to put strong safeties up in the box. Really, both of his safeties. He mixes and matches, likes the versatility. And there's a couple guys that I think are definitely worth mentioning here. Nick Emanuwari from South Carolina, who actually has visited, had a formal with the Seahawks this week. He's 6'3", 220 pounds. He is built like Cam Chancellor was for the Seahawks. Now, I don't want to throw that comp out there because I do think he's a little different style player. I don't think he's got quite the hitting talent that Cam Chancellor did, but he had 2 pick sixes in his time at South Carolina. This guy's got really good coverage skills for a player of his size, and the Seahawks clearly have interest. And then you've got Malik Verdon, who is on the other end of the spectrum here. He is not probably going to be the most athletic safety that you are going to see in this draft class, but he's another one of them that is in that 6'2" to 6'3" range, 210 plus pounds, that can come up and stick people. He's played some as a deep safety as well, but really has made his bread and butter up in the box. A guy that can blitz some, can get after it. He's somebody that's going to go on day 3 unless he just tests way better than expected. But I am curious to see what he looks like at his size. That is that poor man's version in day 3 that you can get that has a chance to maybe be a starter in the NFL. It has a little bit of positional versatility that would make sense for the Seahawks. I'm going to be watching both those players. One that's likely a first rounder would be in play at 18 for the Seahawks, and one that's probably mid to late day 3 in Verdon. And as far as guys at the cornerback and the free safety position to watch, Azariah Thomas from Florida State, the ball production is not there. He had 2 interceptions during his 3 seasons at Florida State. But at the same time, he is sticky in coverage. And for a smaller corner, He will come up and he will stick you. This dude loves to hit. He plays the physicality that Mike Macdonald prefers on the outside. He's got a little experience playing in the slot, but he's also been really good in the boundary. So I think the physicality, the press coverage, he's a guy that hasn't given up a ton of big plays downfield. I'm expecting him to test pretty well. And in this quarterback class that's got decent amount of depth, probably a day 2 selection, even with Florida State not playing well last season, having a really disappointing year. Thomas was one of the few bright spots. He's a guy that makes sense for Seattle. Noel Williams, who played at UNLV, transferred to Cal 2 years ago. He led all corners with 7 picks last season. The ball skills for days. Opposite of Thomas there, he's made a bunch of pass breakups. He'll come up and hit people. He improved dramatically at finishing his tackles this past season for the Golden Bears. But he has had a little bit of a tendency to get burned at times, and I don't know about the top speed against NFL receivers. He might be the player that I'm watching most closely from this cornerback group in this testing, because I just want to see what he runs the 40 like, how his agility testing numbers look, because that doesn't always show up as a strength in his film, and that could make it tough for those ball skills to translate at the next level. But Williams is certainly a guy that's got the turnover capabilities that I think Mike Macdonald is looking for at the cornerback position. Jabbar Muhammad, Husky fans will know him. He played at Washington and then transferred to Oregon this past season. He began his career at a different school as well. So he played for 3 colleges, but had 3 picks in his 1 year at Washington, had double-digit pass breakups each of the last 2 seasons. He gets his hands in the football. He's small. He's 5'10", 175 pounds. I think he is a true slot corner in the NFL. But if Seattle wants to move Devin Witherspoon more to the boundary next season, Muhammad on day 3 would make a lot of sense, and I expect that he's going to do really well in the agility testing and could have a really good 40 time as well. Maybe moves up into early day 3, but I think the fact that he's going to be primarily slot probably impacts his draft standing a little bit from a positional value standpoint. And for the 2 safeties at free safety, Mike Macdonald likes guys that are interchangeable at the safety spot. Sebastian Castro at Iowa, 2 years ago, he had 3 picks, and one of them returned for an interception next to Cooper DeJean. That was a fantastic secondary in Iowa. Castro is a guy that I'm curious to see how he tests, because it doesn't always look like the most explosive athlete, but he's a very high IQ player. He's had a couple of sacks, so he can play up in the box. You can blitz him. He is an interchangeable chess piece. He can play single and 2 high safety. So I think he's one that in maybe day 2, early day 3 would make sense for the Seahawks, especially with Rayshon Jenkins now being allowed to try to request or seek out a trade. The Seahawks clearly are looking at some other options in the safety spot. And if you're looking for day 3 late round value, Maxon Hook from Toledo averaged almost 85 tackles a season his 4 years as a starter there, had 7 picks the last 3 years, participated in the Senior Bowl. He's played in the box. He can blitz. He can play single high. He's got good ball skills. I want to see how he tests, because another player that I think is a really good football player, sound technique, but I have some questions about where the athleticism is going to fit in, and that's probably why you're looking at a 6th or 7th round, maybe even a priority free agent there, but certainly a guy that I'm going to be watching closely at the combine to see how he tests coming out of Toledo. I like the positional versatility and the ability to create turnovers. He's a physical player that will punch the football out as well. There's a lot to like about this kid. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. We'll have another show coming up later today. We're going to have the big winners coming out of the first day of testing. I'll be rejoined by Rob Rang. Tons more combine talk. Make sure that you're listening in. Enjoy your Thursday afternoon. Go Hawks.